Welcome back to LearnPianoLive.com. My name is Jamin, and as you can tell from the countdown clock, the lesson is about to get started. In case you're new with us, there's a few things I'd like to show you to help you throughout the lesson. These lessons are always guided and shaped by your questions, and if you're live with us today, there's a couple different ways you can do that. One is in the public live chat, and the other is the Ask Jamin a Question button, where you can ask me a question privately, and I won't share your identity in case you're afraid that your question is stupid. But it's not. If you're in the archives, though, then just open up the survey. At the end of that, there's a place where you can ask your question. I will say I frequently get questions from students in the archives watching a lesson from 6 months ago, and I have no idea what they're talking about. So please try to be as specific as possible. If you're watching this at LearnPianoLive.com, there should be a PDF and an MP3 button right next to this video. The PDF will often have additional video links inside so you can get more in-depth instruction on each of the topics. And if you're the kind of person who likes to print out the PDF so you can make the same notes on your physical version as I'm making during the lesson, now would be the time to do that. The MP3 is just a play-along track so you can practice more after the lesson. In traditional lessons, a teacher is going to actually present some new concept for maybe 5 or 10 minutes every couple weeks. The rest of the time is going to be spent applying and refining those concepts. Well, here I'm spouting off hours of new information every week, so it's totally unreasonable to expect you to actually absorb all of that. Instead, the goal of these live lessons is for you to find some little nugget of something that makes sense, but is a bit of a challenge, and for you to go practice it, because practice is where all the improvement's going to happen. So don't feel bad if you have to leave the live lesson and you find that little thing that you're going to practice. And of course, if I'm going too fast, you can always rewind the live lessons or replay in the archives as much as you want. If these live lessons start feeling random or meandering, it's because they are, on purpose. So if you're the kind of person who wants classical training with a step-by-step method, then you're going to want to check out Kloppel Academy on the website. It's included in your live lesson subscription, so you can do both or either. And the upper levels are seriously hard work, but it's going to take you all the way from ground zero all the way up to being ready to enter any major music college as a piano major in classical or jazz. And finally, today we're talking about a skill that most people believe is magical, and it's just not. Improvisation. You can learn to just sit down and play a song without having something in mind ahead of time. It's not a magical skill any more than when my daughter asks me, "Daddy, tell me a story." Like, I don't have one in mind ahead of time. It's probably going to be a villain in there. There's probably going to be a hero in there. The hero's probably going to look and sound a lot like me, but I'm just making stuff up, and improvisation is just the musical equivalent of telling stories. In the end, you might find out that you're no Mark Twain, but you can have a lot of fun, and honestly, you can become super decent at it, even if you're not the best. The truth is, even Mark Twain wouldn't have known that he was going to become Mark Twain without a whole lot of practice. So don't be discouraged. You can do this. And you'll need to do this. Every musical scenario, from playing Happy Birthday for your nephew to performing Beethoven at Carnegie Hall, is going to be benefited by good improvisational skills. So, let's make up some stuff together. Ready? Cool. The track goes on for quite some time, but hopefully if you were here for last week's lesson, a lot of that made sense and you kind of saw what I was doing. We're using the same track from last week for right now. And I want to clear up a couple of things from last week too, where we talked about beginning improvisation. So this is kind of the continuation of that. Not kind of, it's definitely the continuation of that. Last week we talked about the pentatonic scale. I need to clear up one thing about that just from the questions that I had. The 4 and the 7 that we took out. Again, this is probably not going to make sense to anyone who wasn't here last week. However, later on, when I get into today's lesson, that should make sense even if you weren't here last week. But for all of you who are trying to continue from last week, the 4 and the 7 are some of the best notes that you could possibly play as long as you play them at the right time. So last week I was talking about the pentatonic scale and how these are the safest notes. That's all like just in the generally speaking the context of most songs, the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 of the scale are going to be the most important, the safest notes to play. The 4 and the 7 are least frequently awesome and simultaneously the most awesome when they do fit in. But they're kind of the scariest, so that's why the pentatonic scale is generally considered kind of a safe scale. One more thing to clarify from last week too. These notes right here are only the notes of the C pentatonic scale. These are not the notes of all pentatonic scales. So if we're in the key of F and you want to use the F pentatonic scale, you've got to go to the F scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and play the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 of that for your F pentatonic scale. But so far, we've only been in the key of C, so that's why we're using this scale the entire time. But in the key of F, for example, this is the F pentatonic scale, and the F plays prominently in the F pentatonic scale. In pretty much all the F scales, F is important. So it's not that you leave out the F and the B for all songs. Just the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 are the notes that make up the C pentatonic scale. So we're in the key of C. This is the pentatonic scale that we would use. Cool. All right. Now that I've alienated all the people who weren't here last week, let's go ahead and do a lesson for everyone, including those who weren't here last week. So once again, this is the track that we're using for right now. A little bit later on, hopefully, if we have time, we'll get to a different play-along track. But this one right here is in the key of C, which again means all the white notes are perfectly safe. And then we can use all the things we talked about last week. Hopefully I included those when I was playing earlier. So we have sequences using the same idea and moving it through the scale. We have the pentatonic scale that we use, and moving mostly stepwise in order to keep it melodic sounding instead of major jumps all over the place. And today we're finally going to talk about chords. So this track that I gave you generally sounds C-ish the whole entire time, but there's actually two. I'm going to lie to you right now and say there's 2 chords in this track. Well, actually, there's kind of 3, but 2 chords will work, and that is we're going to use this C chord, and I'll show you the C chord twice in a row, and then we're going to go to something called the D minor chord twice in a row. So that's this thing right here. We're going to play a C chord. That's just C, E, and G. So in order to find a C, you're going to go to any group of 2 black notes and play the white note that's right below that, just to the left of it. And then we're going to play every other note starting on that. Now, generally, you just play 2 notes on top of that. So a total of 3 notes for a C major, or what we call a triad. Tri meaning 3 notes, 3-note chord is a triad. If you wanted to add in this one too, that would sound just fine on the track that we're playing, but just those 3 notes right there make up a C chord. Cool. So we play that twice in a row, and then we would also play a D minor twice in a row for this particular track, because that's the way this particular track is set up. This is not true for all songs, but the song that I wrote for this track would have a C twice in a row, and they would have a D minor twice in a row, which just means move all those notes over 1 note. Start on a D, and then go every other note. And if you want to add in that extra note right there, so that you got a 4-note chord instead of just a triad, you could do that, or just those 3. So we're gonna have a C twice in a row, and then D minor twice in a row. And along with the track, it sounds like this. Sorry. Those counts one more time are 2, 3, 4. C, and another C, and then a D minor. And and then another D minor. Or if you want to think of it as just one long C all the way up until it's time for D minor. You could do that too. These are all correct. So, C, and then D minor. Cool. So, I'm doing this currently with my left hand. Even if you're right-handed, I'd highly recommend you try this with your left hand, because this is what we want going on in our brain or our left hand, or both, while our right hand is making up melodies. So if you're left-handed, it's going to be probably a little bit easier for you to play these chords at this time. But for right now, just playing these chords and trying to listen to the track. We got this twice in a row, and then the D minor. Now again, I'm not really improvising right now. There's no melody going on. But when I play notes, I can ignore all the chords, or I can pay attention to the chords and play the notes out of the chords. So, for example, when it's time for a C chord, that's a C and a G. C, E, and G. I can emphasize those notes up here, and that's going to sound really cool with this chord because all the notes fit in. Let me show you. So we'd go C, E, G, and then something else for the D minor. And then wait for that to come back around. So we'd go C, E, G, C, E, G. And all those notes sound like they fit in. It sounds like I'm doing a thing, even though I'm really just copying my left hand. Let me show you again. C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E. So I can go like up really far just by following my chord, or down. So that sounds pretty impressive because I'm covering a lot of territory, and it sounds like I really know what I'm doing, even though I'm just repeating the same notes over and over. C, E, G, or backwards G, E, C. So again, on my C chord, I'm trying to emphasize the notes from the C chord. So that's all just stealing notes exactly out of my left hand right here. C, E, G, doing C, E, G-ish stuff. Now, here's the tricky part. When it's time for the D minor, playing notes from the D minor chord. So that would include D, F, and A. And then I would do D's, F's, and A's, D's, F's, and A's, wherever I wanted to during that section. And then when it's time to switch back to the C, we'd go back to the C's, E's, and G's. C, E, G, C, E, G, F, A, D. C, E, G. Now, for all of you adult students, I have to warn you, this is going to make sense in your head way before you can do it in your hands. It's going to take some practice, because as you're watching me do it, you're probably like, oh, I see what you're doing there, cool. And then you go to play it, and it just doesn't happen. That's what it feels like to try to play the piano, and that's why it takes a lot of practice. So anyway, this should hopefully start to make some sense of like, okay, I've got chords that are happening, and then my right hand is trying to pay attention to my left hand, so my right hand can play notes that line up with the left hand. And that concept right there takes tens of hours of practice, or you can just noodle around and just do whatever feels good and sounds good to you. But that's the idea. So if you go back to the very beginning of the lesson when I was first improvising, I think I just started out with like major scale stuff, and then I kind of went to the pentatonic stuff and some like motifs and sequences and stuff like that, like we talked about last week. And then towards the end, I was just playing the chords. Probably the part that sounded like the most complicated was stuff where I was just playing notes from the chord, which is actually the simplest stuff, because I'm just worrying about 3 notes on the C chord section and then 3 notes on the D minor chord section. One more time, the important part is not getting lost where you are on the chords, because if you don't know where the chords are at this current moment, then you don't know which notes you're supposed to emphasize over here. So that's kind of the tricky part, especially once you start getting into like jazz and improvisation and stuff. Getting lost is like one of the major hurdles you got to get over. So this one just has 2 chords in it, C and D minor. Let's try that one more time. You can either play along with me, or you can just watch what I'm doing and see if it makes any sense. I'm gonna just pay attention to my left hand. I'll do this without calling out what chord I'm playing, so you can kind of notice when I switch here, and then hopefully notice the things I'm switching up here. So I won't call out the chords as we go. So. Okay, cool. So then those are just the notes stolen straight out of the chords. And then I told you already, I kind of lied to you about this second D minor over here. It's kind of like a D minor over G or a G suspended, or these notes right here, maybe a G7, or like throwing in a C in there-ish. But anyway, these are kind of the notes that you would throw in for that last chord there. So it's actually 2 C's in a row, and then a D minor, and then like a G there. And that's where, like, this note right here, where at the very beginning of the lesson, I was like, the pentatonic scale, sometimes the 4 and sometimes the 7 sound really great. Well, guess what? On that D minor, that 4 sounds really great because it's one of the 3 notes of the D minor chord. And that 7 that we talked about before, which usually sounds difficult to take on most chords. On that 5 chord, on the G chord, it's one of the prettiest notes that you could possibly play because G, B, and D are the 3 notes of the G chord. So now let's try this one more time. Now that we got more chords in here, it's much easier to get lost. So I'm gonna play 2 C's in a row, and then a D minor, and then a G. And hopefully you can begin to notice, or at least know that the thing that I'm doing up here is related to the notes that I'm playing down here. Here we go. You can play along or just watch what I'm doing. And C. G. D. And actually getting to each of these chords on time is probably the main challenge here. Not getting lost, number one, that happens in your head. In your hands, actually making the transitions between the chords. Most people play through it like this. They find the C, okay, cool, I can play the C. Here are the notes I would use that, okay, cool. And then D minor, right, here's the notes I would use for that, all right, cool. And then G is those ones, and I'd use these ones. Okay, cool, I'm ready to play. No, you're not. Because you gotta get to those chords on time. So we probably need to practice that up without the track until you can make all those moves pretty seamlessly, because you gotta get to them on time. Otherwise, you're gonna make that sound, which always means I'm not ready to play along with the track. It just means I need more practice time. And so practice those up without the track and then try to throw in those notes. Now, this is not actually the thing I would do in my right hand. I would probably play things that really emphasize the notes from the left hand, but I had some connecting notes as well. And I tried to stay away from connecting notes, so those of you who are like new to this concept would be able to follow along with, I'm just playing notes from the left hand. But the truth is, as long as I'm playing a C chord, I can still play notes in between. I can play straight through, connecting these notes, but right on the change, I'm gonna wanna play one of the notes out of that chord. So I can kind of play whatever I want, but right when it's time to change, I wanna make sure that I hit one of the notes out of that D minor chord. And the same thing is true for, I can play the D minor chord, but when it's time to change to the G, I wanna play one of the notes out of the G chord. So now I'm gonna play something that would sound a little bit more melodic, stealing a little bit from the motifs and the sequences and the pentatonic scales and all that stuff that we talked about before. But right on the change, I'm gonna try to hit one of the notes from the chord. And at this point, we're talking like, if you're in Clopple Academy level, like 3 or 4, this is where we start talking about like chord changing and what we call making the changes, which just means on a chord change, you're hitting one of the notes from the chord and then moving on from there. It would sound something more like this. 3, 4. So there we go. I'm playing, hopefully, you notice a little more stepwise. I'm utilizing some of the stuff we talked about last week, but then on each of those chord changes, I'm trying to hit one of those notes. Now, eventually, after you practice it this way, you get your left hand going, you got to practice that up. Practice that with the track. Cool. Try the right hand stuff without the track. Then you try with the track. Oh, that's going great. So we're up to like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks worth of assignments so far, just trying to get this stuff together with this track. Then eventually we take the left hand out and we're just thinking about it. And we're trying to make those changes in the right hand without the left hand in there. You want to be able to do it both with and without, because depending on the circumstance, who you're playing along with and stuff, you may want to have the actual full chord in there, or you might have someone else like a guitarist or someone who's playing that chord for you, and then you're playing just the melody part. So the chords should be happening in your head, whether or not you're actually playing them with your left hand. Okay, well then at this point, we're pretty much done with the concepts, except to maybe perhaps apply it to one of the songs we've done recently, like the song Summertime. So this one doesn't have too many chords in it. You do need to keep track of where you are in it. This track right here is on the Learn Piano Live YouTube channel. It's largely D minor. If I go along in the chords, I'll show you these chords here. First, just with my left hand. So this will be all D minor, like it says, or D minor 7. And then you go to a G minor, and then an E minor flat 5, which you don't have to worry about, and then an A, and then a D minor, and then G minor, C, F, E half diminished, A, D minor. I'm gonna slow this down so you can kind of follow along. I'm going to play the chords in the left hand and then show you some stuff that you could do in the right hand along with this song. Again, this is like 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of good hard practice down the road if these concepts are new to you and you haven't practiced this stuff before. So don't feel like you should be able to do this yet, but I'm hoping that some of this kind of makes sense, at least grabbing the concept that, oh, there's chords that are happening and that tells the melody which notes are going to like fit in the best. And right when we change chords is the point at which you want to hit one of those notes in your right hand for a, I'm going to say good sounding solo. Yeah. Okay. So something like that. Here we go. Let's try this again. All right. D minor. G minor, hitting one of the notes. E half diminished. A. D minor. G, C, E, A, D. One more time. I'm not gonna play the chords. I'll try to call them out though. So D minor, G minor, E half diminished, A, D minor. Sorry, I didn't call that one. notice at this point, I'm just playing the melody, but the melody follows the same rules as good improvisation because they should be the same in that they should both have the melody hitting one of the notes out of the chord right when the chord changes. G minor. Is E, and it's still in the A chord that E is. So this is kind of the building blocks. This is well into the building blocks of soloing over jazz tracks, whether smooth jazz or these kinds here, swing. A lot of these solos are largely based on what's happening in the chords. So even if you're not going to play the chords, just having them happen in your head is really going to inform what happens in your right hand. But let's go way, 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 way back to that first thing. First of all, you might be on last week's lesson right now, which is totally cool. Just working on this track that I gave you in the key of C and trying to make it sound rhythmic. Shoot, if you do that much, then already you're sounding better than most soloists. So staying inside the key and being rhythmic, that's cool. If you can play some like pentatonic scales stuff, some motif stuff or sequencing, that's all great. If you can play these chords in your left hand, even better. If you can switch to the chords on time, wonderful. You're like 70, 80% of the way there. And then just trying to pay attention as you're noodling around. You can just noodle around and not pay attention to the chords at all. But if every now and then, as you're playing your pentatonic stuff, you're like, oh, right there, that was D minor. Maybe I could hit a note from a D minor, like that one. Cool, I hit one of the notes from the D minor. Then slowly start to let these notes leak into your solos. That will greatly increase the I want to say the professionalism of your solos and make it sound more on purpose, even if you're just playing notes out of the chords. So anyway, try that stuff. Let me know how it goes. We're going to start with the scales, then add take the notes out for the pentatonic scales, adding in a note in. I think we talked about that last week. And then trying to do the chords in your left hand and then adding the melody, the improvisation in the right hand. That's a lot to do. So good luck with that. Let me know how it goes. Send me your questions and we'll continue on with this next week. Until then, go explore, mess up, have fun, rock on.